Hello, hello, everyone. Can I see your hands up? Yeah. Welcome to GC Now, and welcome to The Secret Ingredient, where we'll be talking about women economic power. And before we proceed to this exciting panel, let me take this opportunity to welcome on board the amazing panelists. And the first one is a gynecologist and founder of Women at Risk International Foundation, Kemi Da Silva Ebru. A round of applause. And second on stage is the president and CEO of African Center of Economic Transformation in Ghana, Mavis Owusu-Gyamfi. And last is the Minister of Water and Sanitation from South Africa, Minister Pemi Majodina. A round of applause. Okay, so we're going to talk about women economic power, but before we go around, I don't know what you understand when you hear women economic power, but this is what we mean. First is moving away from a framework of empowerment of women and girls, and instead tapping into the potential and power to create change. And second, we mean unlocking women's potential to bring economic growth, sustainable development, and prosperity. And last, all of this is only possible if we respect their rights, protect their health, and accelerate more resources through financial inclusion. So what is it we want to talk about today? We want to talk about 3 important investments. Number 1, investing in women's health, access in sexual reproductive health and rights. This is non-negotiable. Women's bodily autonomy, health, are central to advancing women's power, full stop. Number 2, investing in women entrepreneurs, businesses, and women's financial inclusion. We need to show women the money. There is so much potential that is wasted because of political, cultural, and social barriers that prevent women from participating in the economy. And last, we want to address the needs of young people, particularly in Africa, at the intersection of climate, health, and the economy. The Africa of today is young, vibrant, and ready to advance. You can see me, right? And now, we want to invest in this Africa. So, before we proceed to our conversation, we know that numbers help us make calculative decisions, right? Yes or no? We use numbers, right? So, I'm going to be your professor today and give you a little bit of a quiz. Are you ready? Yes. So, I'm going to write 3 numbers. And while we have a discussion, I would like you to tell me, what do you understand when you see these numbers? Yeah? Anything coming to mind? Anything coming into mind? No. You will get to know that very soon. You all look amazing, ladies. Can we clap for them? I see the resemblance and representation of Africa, and I hope you can see the same. So we're going to start a conversation, and I'm going to start with Mavis. Your organization, Asset, is focused on economic transformation across Africa, in over a decade, the African Transformation Report has explored what is holding back African economies from scaling, the importance of regional integration beyond trade, and the interplay between gender equity and economic transformation. Could you share more with us about these findings?
Lydia, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to join you today. So at ASSET, as you rightly say, our data is showing that Africa is not transforming at the pace it needs to transform to keep a pace with population growth and the demands of its economy. So what our reports try to do is to deep dive, to understand why and how to get back on track. So our new transformation report, which will be launched later this year, is looking at gender inequity and how gender inequity is affecting our slow transformation on the continent. And our early findings actually show three things matter the most: perceptions, policies, and power. So let me start with perceptions. This persistent belief that if you are a female, you are somehow less capable or less worthy of equality is really holding back our transformation. I know everybody is sitting here nodding, but the truth is that perception really exists. We need to increase women's representation, voice, and visibility in policy making, in business, and in public life. Not just at the top, but at all levels, so that we can change that perception around our capability. We also need to do this so that young people like yourself can see it as a norm, so that we break that historical, structural, normative value that we are struggling so much to break. So that's the first one. And secondly, policy matters. So in our transformation index, we've been really struck by one thing. Some countries continue to transform, others start to transform, and then they lag. And in this report, we are seeing that gender equality actually drives economic transformation. So countries that are making improvements on gender equality are doing better on transformation than those that are not. You can transform without gender equality. But what we are seeing is that countries that are transforming without gender equality are not sustaining that transformation. So they peak, the jobs are not decent, it doesn't work well, and guess what? It drops back. One of these countries, unfortunately, is my beloved country, Ghana. Okay? So we really need to make sure that our policies are gender specific, they are intentional, they recognize that we start from a low base, they recognize the inequality within systems, they recognize that when we go to the financial markets, we actually don't have the basic assets for collateral. We need to create policies that take all of these factors into consideration, both at the macro level and the micro level. Ministers of finance need to budget to take into account that inequality. And finally, power. Power structures are so imbalanced. And that imbalance is having such a negative impact on our society. And that imbalance starts at the household level, within our communities, the way our traditional leaders perceive us. We need to really reframe who holds power and balance who holds power within our societies. But the thing that we've been really struck by in our report is we don't measure the impact of power balance on economic development and growth. We don't have either the qualitative or quantitative data to show that if you cede power today, men, it's a win-win situation if it's balanced. So the really important thing is we need to start measuring power and the impact of power balance and power equity on our development as a continent.
Wow, thank you. That's really... I love what you said. I would say you're talking about the 3 Ps, perception, policy, and power. We'll come back to that, but now let's move to Dr. Kemi. You look amazing.
Thank you.
I know the work that you're doing, and I know your mission is to tackle high incident rape, sexual assault, and human trafficking in Nigeria and across Africa through a holistic approach that combines direct service delivery, advocacy, and community engagement. As a medical doctor yourself, you've seen the impact of lack of access to comprehensive post-incident services to survivors of GBV, which include their sexual and reproductive health and rights. Tell us your thoughts on why interventions like this are urgent to deliver in Africa, and what African women need in the health space, and what governments and donors need to do to create a shift in strengthening a system change towards protecting women and girls.
Okay then, Lydia, thank you. Well, let me start by saying hello to everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. As Lydia says, my background is in healthcare, but I think I need to paint the picture of Africa and the current situation to put things in context. So 54 countries across the African continent, and half of us are sub-Saharan and the others are North African. And I'm from Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the sub-Saharan countries, the largest and most populated on the continent. And in my country, 1 in 4 girls before the age of 18 would experience at least one violent sexual encounter. And when you look at it across the ages of 15 and 49, 1 in 3 girls would have at least one physical or sexual violent encounter in her lifetime. And Nigeria, as I said, is the most populated country, 200 million of us, and half of us are women. So when you look at the numbers, you appreciate that 10,000 girls every day somewhere is being abused. So the statistics that I am quoting are actually comparable to many other African countries. So that's the first urgent need, the numbers. We can't live in a world today and process those numbers and carry on having our Starbucks coffee and not worrying about what's happening in the global south. The other issue is time, or perhaps the slow hands of time. In Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, I'm told that it will take 130 years to achieve gender parity. And that's not in any of our lifetimes. I'm also aware that my country is listed 122 out of 145 index countries on the gender gap, on the global gender gap. So again, that's an issue. And when we ask why, I think many a time we've had conversations about that. We know there's a patriarchy in many of our low middle income countries like mine. We also know that we have traditional practices that sadly contribute and are complicit in this violence against women and men. Now, don't misunderstand me. Africa, like many other countries and continents, has beautiful culture and wonderful heritage and amazing traditions. I mean, our fashion, each of us here are representing Africa in what we're wearing. I mean, who hasn't heard of jollof rice, or who hasn't enjoyed a warm bowl of jollof rice, or heard the Afrobeats music? But we can't ignore the detrimental effect. So what do we need? We need to what? Change the narrative. We need a tangible action plan. We need innovative changes so that we could frog leap. And like you rightly said, we need everyone's involvement, the governmental agencies, the donors, but then you and I. We need organizations like Global Citizen. We need to have conversations like this that talk about linkages and intersections. I sit here representing health, gender violence, and we're talking climate. We can immediately see the linkage there. We can appreciate resource scarcity when you look at the climate change. You can appreciate women that have challenges because of migration. I have, internally displaced persons back in Nigeria who are living and have been living in these countries, rather in my country, for many years. So I would say that yes, the impact and donor and governmental input is necessary, but it has to be a collective effort. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Let's clap for that. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Kemi. Now moving to our minister for the day. South Africa is a leader on the continent in supporting gender equality and unlocking the power of women and girls. Tell us more about how you center gender equality in your work on water and sanitation and where more attention is needed now.
Thank you very much, moderator. I stand on the established protocols of this house. Thank you to my beautiful three sisters on this stage. Indeed, Africa is in the house. There are three triplets that are associated with women: inequality, underdevelopment, and poverty. Who bears the brunt of poverty? Who bears a brunt when there is no water? None other than a woman. What must be done? Empower a woman. When you educate a man without any offense, you educate an individual. When you educate a woman, you educate a society. A round of applause. Women in the continent of Africa make up to 52%. Where are they found? They are found in their household. They are found in rural areas. With the climate change, what do you need? You need to empower these women to be able to respond. You need an agile community, agile global citizens to support those women. The municipalities across the world, across the countries, must ensure that the spatial planning take women to a center stage, because women can save lives. It was not by mistake that God created us as women to give life. We carry a child for 9 months and we deliver that child alive. Therefore, we are entrusted by God that we can save lives. Therefore, it is important to ensure that women save lives. When we do budgeting, the government must put a gender lens on budgeting to be able to deal with the disadvantages where women are unable to access funds. Bring those women in the center stage. Nothing about us without us. We must be there in the center.
Thank you so much, Minister. I hear very important critical words like gender lens when it comes to budgeting. And since we're going now back to our numbers, we will get to understand more. Now, coming back to you, Mavis, going back to the numbers that I wrote here, and I know everyone is wondering, what are these numbers? What is $79 billion? You're about to find out now. So Mavis, new research by partners, including the Gates Foundation, shows that $42 billion investment gap exists across Africa for female entrepreneurs. And now it's $42 billion in economic activity that could be happening now if women were better included in financial system. Now, tell us why we need to fill this gap and how can we best do it?
Thank you very much. So let's start with a conversation that is happening in New York this week. We need finance, we need finance, we need finance. At a time when Africa is struggling with debt burdens, not bringing in enough taxes to service its people, okay? At a time when we are living under a global financial regime that is not serving us as a continent, when we are repaying debt instead of investing in our health, the health of our young women and girls, okay? At a time like this, when we are struggling to generate jobs for our young people, okay? For me, it is criminal that we are not tapping into this 42 million. Simple, it's criminal, okay? Secondly, it's important because if I talked earlier on about the importance of gender inclusion in transformation, and the minister talked about 52% of the continent is female. If you leave 52% or most of that 52% out, you leave it at a cost. But just think about not just Africa, the world. In 2100, 1 in 8 people walking this earth will be an African woman. Do you think the world can afford to leave females out, African women?
No.
Do you? Thank you. Thirdly, productivity is an issue for us. If you look at all the data, it says women are not producing as much. Women are not getting enough return. African women could increase productivity by 19% if they had access to finance. They represent 40% of smallholder farmers. And yet we are not gaining access to that finance, okay? And finally, from just a basic fairness perspective, ladies, how long do we have to say equality is our right? How long do we have to say it? Thank you. Wow. So just from a basic perspective, okay? So, to do that, we need to tap into the finance. And earlier on, I said the system doesn't work in our favor. So long as we keep expecting women to provide collateral that they don't have access to because of an unequal society, they will not tap into that 42 million. We need to fix the way we lend to women. If women don't know where they can access this finance, it's a problem. 20% of African SMEs have access to institutional financing. That's appalling. So just some basic things. Rethink collateral. Revisit information and networks so the women know where to go for this money. And thirdly, lose the perceptions that we are not capable. Is there a woman in this room who doesn't believe they are capable of managing money? That says it all.
I think for your question, we will only find out if we give them money, right?
Yeah.
Let's give them money and find out whether they can manage or not, right?
And we have a lot of room for failure. Sorry.
Yeah.
We've given men so much leeway for failure.
Yeah.
We have room.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're moving to Dr. Kemi. We go to the second number there. The United Nations tells us that if we invest 79 billion in low and middle income countries between now and 2030, 400 million unplanned pregnancies could be averted, 1 million maternal and newborn lives saved, and $660 billion in economic benefits could be generated. These are big numbers. Now, explain to us and broken down how these numbers benefits and translate on the ground, impacting individual women and communities in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you, Lydia. Well, I was reminded recently, as actually goalkeepers, that the true index of well-being of any country is the maternal health and the infant mortality. An African woman today who experiences pregnancy and childbirth concerns would die 130 more times than a woman experiencing childbirth in high-income countries. The maternal mortality rate in Nigeria today is over 1,000 live births per 1,000 women, per every 100,000 live births. To put that again into context, in America it's only 22. So these are the numbers that we're dealing with on the African continent. When you talk about economic benefits, I mean, Mavis has summed it up nicely. Presently, the average African girl in my part of the world would start school, primary level school, so between the ages of 5 and 12, about 70% of the classroom will be full of these young girls. But only 10% actually finish university. When she gets married, we're living in the patriarchy, she has no autonomy over herself. She doesn't have any decision-making power in her home or in her community. So she's constrained, regardless of whether or not there's evidence of physical violence. If she were to die, her husband gets married again and carries on with his life. But if she becomes a widow, all of his property is transferred back to his family, regardless of whether or not she has children. So this is the current situation of many women in fragile societies, in communities across Africa. So what would that $79 billion do? It'll be transformational. It'll give her a sense of purpose. It would help her by giving her economic independence. It'll give her empowerment programs. It'll allow her children, especially her young daughters, to go to school. But the one thing that we must remember, and this is, I think, the most important point I'd like to make, is when we do give the money, we have to remember that communities and countries across the African continent are different. And so therefore, it cannot be a one-size-fits-all. And it cannot be one program across sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa. You have to have the individuals that are either implementing these programs or making these policies part of the decision-making process on how these funds will be dispersed. And then we will start to talk about appropriate access to healthcare. We will start talking about the proper training that we need in the labor force. We will start talking about the empowerment of women through the independent processes that we've laid out for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kemi. Thank you. Thank you. Just to round up with the minister, I'd like to ask you one quick question, because I'm a young person from Tanzania, and I'm really curious, how do you best we can support young people in Africa? Census data tells us that 40% of Africans are under the age of 15, compared to 25% globally. In your view, what investment do we need to make now in order to empower young people, particularly young women of South Africa and the continent of Africa?
Thank you very much, moderator. The first thing to do is to integrate women's perspective into the economy of water by ensuring that women become their own ambassadors when it comes to water. Secondly, reduce or abolish the unpaid labor that women go through every day, fetching water, bathing children, making everything to be fine for everybody else except themselves. But also, who drop out in schools? It's young women, because they had to go and fetch water, make water accessible, fund infrastructure of water, invest in water, so as to eliminate long distances that young women had to go down the river, down the forest to get water, because that in turn exposed them to gender-based violence and femicide. And therefore, it is important that put young women and women into an incubator program for a specific time, because women have what it takes. They can stand on their own. Just put in investment in terms of funds, and you'll see the results that are going to be positive.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We've reached the end of our discussion today, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank my amazing panelists. And without leaving, I would like to give you a few points as your takeaway. One is nothing can be accomplished without unlocking women's power. Yeah? You agree? Yes. And not climate justice, not sustainable development, not food security, and not even economic growth. So keep it in your mind, how does this further women's power whenever you're considering policy on ending extreme poverty? The second one is investment in women's health is investment in economic growth. It is a false choice to seek growth without investing in the human capital necessary to make that growth sustainable. And another one is trust African women who know best what their communities need in order to thrive, yeah? Change is possible. We can make the right investment to unleash the power of the generation of women, but we have to decide to do it now. I hope today's discussion is going to make you more intentional about supporting women power. Thank you very much.